Hello and welcome to today's information program. I'm very happy to be here with you. My name is Dr. Gary Redfeather. I'm happy to be providing you with a little bit of information about De Montfort University's Clinical Leadership Education and Research Program. I'm not going to be alone for the full time today. I'm actually going to be joined by a very good friend of mine and former student of the program, Dr. Andy Ward. Andy, welcome in today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Very happy to have you here. And so folks, what we're going to do today is we're going to share a slide deck with you, providing information about the program. Andy will be coming and joining in a little bit later to give his perspective. He'll introduce what his role is. And what drew him into the program, and what prompted him to continue not just through the postgraduate certification award, but the postgraduate diploma and the master's award. So we're very happy to have Andy joining us today. And so with this, I'm going to share a few slides with you to orient you to the program. Hopefully, you will have some questions along the way. If I don't provide all of the information, you can enter in the information into the chat function. You can always reach out to me later on if there are additional questions that you would have. And so with that, I'm very happy to introduce you to DMU's Clinical Leadership Education and Research Program, and more importantly, to hopefully answer the question, is this possibly for you? So, as I mentioned, my name is Gary Redfeather. I'm the program lead and senior lecturer in the School of Pharmacy at De Montfort University. I've been running leader development programs in the U.S. for about the past 30 years. I've been happily at De Montfort University for the past 4, running this particular program. So I'm very, very excited to be talking with you about this because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And so in order to introduce the concept, which will introduce the material, I wanted to just simply ask you to consider the question, what were you taught a leader looks like? Because this is something that students need to kind of face, literally and metaphorically, when they join the program. And I'll just summarize what I was taught. I was taught that it looked something along the lines like this. Like there was somebody leading out in front in a very flamboyant way, throngs of people, and the more they just simply marched on in their fancy suit, the more people would follow. It was a great thing. They were marching along, playing behind them, and they just simply, well, that wasn't quite the reality, I think, that started appearing, at least to me and to others, in that leadership kind of seemed to be a little bit different. Yes, there are leadership positions that are leading in front, if you will, but I tend to think of leadership a little bit differently in that it might be more like a scrum. We may be the scrum captain. We may be in the back of a group of people muddied and bloodied, and we're just simply trying to push them forward. There's a combination really of these different types of images of leader, but very importantly, what we're taught about leadership determines what we think about leaders. And if we're not quite the flamboyant leader out in front, we may mistakenly think that we are actually not leaders. And so what I like to do is question, and this is what we do in the program, what ultimately defines an effective leader? And so here's some different pictures. The top one is more of an accepted group of individuals who most people would believe are leaders. The ones on the left-hand side of the screen, however, are a mixed bag, including folks like Hitler, Pol Pot, Mussolini, and a couple other people from history who, other people would say, well, they're not leaders at all. Well, by all definitions, anyone who rallies around people around a particular cause and gets them to do certain things are ultimately leaders. Are they effective leaders in ways that benefit society and the population on a whole? That's a different question. And so part of the program establishes a very good precedent of simply saying, wow, I think we need to unlearn, or maybe it's in our best interest to unlearn or at least question what we've been taught in the past. And so in the program, I'm a pharmacist. I've been a pharmacist, practicing pharmacist for about 30 years. The program tends to focus on using medicine metaphors when it comes to leadership. And I like this particular graphic because I collect antique pharmacy items, but it also illustrates that leadership is a lot like medicine. It can be either a poison or an antidote. And what really determines the outcome is a mixture of certain things like manufacturing, administration, dosing, interaction, packaging. What becomes or what starts as a particular antidote or medicine can very quickly become a poison. Now, the converse is true as well. Some poisons that we know about are very effective therapeutics. What makes them that is really this mixture of a lot of different things. Well, leadership is exactly that. Leadership is a mixture of skill sets that either enable thriving on a corporate or even global level or not. The biggest question that I think we would want to address here in the next few minutes that we have together is, which are you in your current role? Do you see yourself as an antidote or do you see yourself as a poison? Because if you are a clinician, if you are practicing in any way, shape, or form, you are a leader. Doesn't matter if you have the title or not, you are a leader. If you have a title, the potential for you to be an even greater poison is there, but the potential for you to be a bigger therapy is there as well. And so what I wanted to do is to explore this a little bit by describing for you the Clinical Leadership in Education and Research Program. This used to be called the Medical Leadership in Education and Research Program because at its inception about 6 years ago, it served medics only. And we'll talk with Andy a little bit about this because he is a medic. We've switched the program this last year to be interprofessional. The tenets are still the same of the program. And so the Clinical Leadership Education and Research Program really starts within. So it focuses on you as an individual, developing skill sets so that you can help develop those skill sets in others that then propagate into organizational changes. Now, what does it look like? Well, it's easier to think in different buckets, the whys, the whos, and the hows. And so the whys really is, why did we want to develop this particular type of program? Well, as we mentioned, leadership is either a cure or a poison. Globally, this is being seen daily. It always has been, but it's a little bit more in the news now. It impacts everyone everywhere. And really, the historical understandings and approaches that we've been using are inadequate. Some would say woefully inadequate, and some would even say destructive. Because if we were doing things better, we would have better outcomes. The outcomes that we are seeing now are a readout of what we have done in the past or what we are doing. So what we wanted to do is say, okay, if these are the realities, then what can we simply do? Well, the who's are who's involved in all of this. Now, key to our program is the fact that this is interprofessional. This is a truly multidisciplinary interprofessional program. So we have medics, we have nurses, we have pharmacists, we have psychiatrists, we have social care workers, we have a whole mixture of professionals coming to the table because, well, as we know, we all need to work together as a team. Why don't we train together so that we can break down some of the artificial barriers that we think may exist? And finally, we wanted to weave in both the book smarts and the street smarts because both of these are necessary. And what I mean by that is leadership is being taught by lots of different organizations that do not have scientific backing to them. They are not based on hardcore theoretical underpinnings. They may sound like they're effective programs, but they do not have the backing, if you will, of research. Now, research is also partial in that it must be applied. And so our program is a combination of both theoretical underpinnings, but practical applications. And you will start with very practical things from day one in the program. So how we do this is basically by what's called a progressive build. And so, yes, we have 3 different awards. Each of them are standalones, if you will, on their own merits, but each of them continue to build an acumen over the course of the master's level program if you so decide to go into that. Now, the postgraduate certification is the first year of the program. It really gets personal. It starts to do border into relational aspects of leadership, and then it gets into the conceptual realms of education and research. I'll describe these a little bit more in the next slide or two. The second year is the postgraduate diploma level, and this is all about service improvement. It's very specific, it's very concrete, it's very applied. And so if you work in a program or if you work in an organization that says, you know what, we don't necessarily want to support your education because we're not too sure there's going to be a return on the investment, this is where the return on the investment can be seen for the organization. We'll talk about that in just a moment and maybe ask Andy about that coming up. And then finally, the third year of the program is the master's level program. And this is an opportunity for those of you who have burning interests that you just really want to have answered that can best be answered by a master's dissertation. Okay, so are you able to do this as a working healthcare practitioner? That's probably one of the most common questions we get. And the answer is yes, we have designed this to meet you literally and metaphorically where you are so that you can get through this. Okay. But first, I wanted to describe a little bit more the program. Now, the program itself is, again, this progressive build. The postgraduate certification is 60 credits of level 7 work. The postgraduate diploma is another 60, and then the master's level is another 60. So there's 3 years worth of programs that will equate to 180 university credits at level 7. Now, the first year, the postgraduate certification award is divided up into 4 modules. The first one is called professional and personal development. This is all about you asking the questions like, what are your core values? What are your passions? Where do you find meaning and purpose? Questions that you may not have ever been asked, but yet resiliency is completely tied to meaning and purpose. Resiliency is tied to finding meaning and having a passion for what you do. Those are tied to your core values. If you've never had the opportunity to take a step back and ask these very fundamental questions about yourself, this is the opportunity to do so. The second module is called Partnerships with Stakeholders and Patients. And this is where we transition from learning about yourself to now you have a skill set where you can develop conversations with key individuals around a specific topic that you are very interested in, just to learn different perspectives. How you ask a question determines how the person answers. And so if you want to get an objective assessment of something, you really need the skill set on how to ask unbiased, unleading types of questions. That is found in the second module of partnerships with key stakeholders and patients. The other 2 modules that round out the postgraduate certification award are concepts in education and concepts in research. These are the modules that allow us to take a step back and say, we've learned a lot about ourselves. We've learned a lot about our relationship with others. How does that tie into education? If we are clinicians, we are educators. Just like if we are clinicians or researchers, we are educators. The last module is concepts in research, which allows us to take a step back and go, how do we know what we're doing is valid? A lot of the stuff we may have been taught in the past might have sounded good, might have been based on an understanding that was rather limited. We need to understand the very fundamentals of research on a conceptual level to go, how do I even know what I'm doing is worth doing and going to lead me down the path that I wanted to go to? So anyway, that's a very high overview of the postgraduate certificate award. The postgraduate diploma, as I said, is focused almost exclusively on service development, with the exception of a few different optional modules that allow you to tailor make your educational experience into a package that's more germane to you and your particular focus. So we have a development of a service improvement project, which allows you to craft activities long before you start the activities. A lot of activities fail because we don't think the strategies or the options before we actually start enacting them. The development of the service improvement project allows you to do that. The demonstration of the service improvement project is the vast majority of that second year. Key to this is you are being asked to do a service improvement project, demonstrating you understand the concepts of service improvement, but your mark is not tied to the quote unquote success of your project. So this allows you to take a step back and go, I'm encouraged to fail. I'm encouraged to learn. I'm encouraged to explore in ways that I'm not going to be penalized. I don't know about you, but if your work encourages or rewards you for your failures, you're in a very unique work position. Most don't. Most reward you for your successes and penalize you for your failures. This is an opportunity to kind of venture out into unknown territory. But the key thing here is that your mark is tied to the demonstration of your learning, the demonstration of applying theoretical underpinnings in a service improvement project. It doesn't have to be a quote unquote success, if you will. And then scored in between those two are some optional modules. You simply need to take one out of these three. First one is about mentoring, focusing on really how do we encourage the growth of others. Educational assessments for those of you who want to have a stronger focus on education. And then leading and managing change for those of you who may be more interested in organizational dynamics. And finally, the master's level award is either qualitative, quantitative, or systematic process or literature reviews. Now, key to this is not a master's in research. And so if you are more of a clinician, you want to stay in the clinical world, this is perfect for you. A lot of master's programs that are out there are research intensive, only focusing on research. Ours is blended. If you want to go down the research route, you can do the qualitative or quantitative research. If you want to stick with something a little bit more broad, you may do so. So anyway, that's the rough outline of the program. Key to the inclusion criteria that you may be interested in is we're looking for active working healthcare practitioners in England. Unfortunately, we're not outside of England yet. So Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Sorry, you can't join us yet. If you're interested and you're listening to this from afar, unfortunately, we do not take true international students. But I will get back to Tier 2 visa students in just a moment. You do need to be registered with a relevant governing body. That's like the GMC, the GPHC for pharmacists or nurses, GMC, etc. We do need you to have at least 2 years experience. And the reason why we want that is that 2 years is a key window for us in that you're a little bit more up to or up on what is really happening in the real world, but you don't also need to have at least 5 or longer years in order to come in. So 2 years experience post-qualification is perfect. The ability to attend 1 to 2 virtual study days per module. Most of them are 1. When you get into the later modules, it is 2, but these are virtual. Again, you do not need to come to the campus in order to participate in the program, and the cost is £28.44 per year. Okay. Now, importantly, I mentioned international students. If you are within the NHS or within a UK healthcare system, you have been here for 2 years, you are registered with the governing body, and you're able to attend the virtual study days, DMU will not charge you the international student fee. A lot of cost savings. The reason why we did this is because you are benefiting the society, the local area, the local community, if you will. You should be encouraged and strongly supported to come into the program at home costs. And so that's what the cost will be for you if you are on that Tier 2 visa. Now, finally, you might have questions about the assessments, the workloads, and all this. We're really focused on listening to you, allowing you to use your voice. The program is not a very intensely lecture-based. We provide you the constructs for you to explore, but really this is all about self-managed learning, okay? There are 2,000 to 3,000 word essays for each module. They're either self-reflective, descriptive, analytical. It just depends on the module. There are some formative competency mapping exercises. This is beautiful for your continuing professional development. If you have a portfolio that you need to do, we provide you direct feedback on how to make sure that you are aligning with your professional standards at a higher level. During each year. And then finally, we allow you to explore conversations with peers, administrators, family members, and all of this is around the trifecta, if you will, of leadership, education, and research. And the reason why we brought the three of these together is because without each of those components, your true education would not be as rounded as we believe it does need to be. And the approach is very much an encouraged watch and explore, read, but then do activities and then reflect on these activities and just simply repeat. So it's very experiential, very active on both our and your parts. And then finally, just an example of some of the content that we cover. Just want to throw out a question here and say, why, on a physiological level, might individual and organizational changes be quote unquote difficult when they're absolutely inherent to every single system? And I'll just draw you to the last point with the picture up at the top. And so none of us have to do anything really to go from the pictures on the left-hand side of that picture, that collage, to the right. We wake up 20 years after we graduated from primary school or secondary school, and um, our bangs, our fringe, our hairline may have started from here and now it's someplace else. So change is absolutely natural to us, but yet we resist it on physiological and organizational levels all the time. The reason why this happens, and I'm a neuropharmacologist, and I'll just simply point this out, is that we have hundreds of redundant systems in every single cell of our body that prevent us from changing from what we are to maybe what we want to be. And this happens on organizational levels as well. The program is based highly, intensively on systems biology, physiology, and medicine. So if that is your background, this is for you. It does touch upon business, it does touch upon other particular areas, but all of this is rooted in the most fundamentals that we know of life and physiology. And so that's just an example of the content that we have. And then in the end, I'll just wrap this around because this is where I'd like to bring Andy in, is the GMC has published something just in 2019. So this is barely pre-pandemic. And it was a document, if you haven't seen it, it's called Caring for Doctors, Caring for Patients. And a very small table that appears in one of the last pages of the entire report has to do with a table called Compassionate Leadership. Now, this is critical, I think, because it encapsulates how we are to care for the doctors or care for the healthcare practitioners, for that matter, caring for patients. And these are skills that can be cultivated within an individual so that they can in turn cultivate these exact things in their peers and their patients. And so I'm not going to go through those, but these are the things that we ask our students to think about. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here, bring Andy into the video, and welcome him in, and say, Andy, would you introduce yourself, what your role is, and what brought you into the program, and how might you be using it now?
Okay, thanks, Ray. So I'm Andy. I'm a GP. I work in the health service in Corby in Northamptonshire. I also work at Leicester Medical School, where I'm a clinical education. I've been there for 15 years or so. So I was drawn to the programme probably originally by the education elements of it, because I wanted to develop my abilities in those areas. But actually, as I joined the programme, it was the leadership and the research parts that sort of became the most important bits to me, because I was able to develop myself further into new areas by exploring those two areas. And so I completed the 3 years of the programme, because the final year, the main focus being research, was me pushing myself and just trying to sort of develop myself further. And I found that the programme was really excellent at sort of doing that. I've taken on leadership roles in the midst of this. I'm now the Director of Education Training at Lakeside Healthcare Group, which is one of the biggest primary care providers in the UK. And the ability, the programme gave me the skills and the sort of confidence to take on sort of a high profile leadership role like that, and develop my own leadership style. So I think it was really helpful. And what I found is having that qualification on my CV, if I now apply, if I'm looking at leadership posts or other roles, it's a strong it's a strong qualification to hold up, and people are always very interested in it. They want to find out more about it because it's quite unusual.
Brilliant, Andy. So I have a question for you, because a lot of people would look at your CV and go, you've already arrived. Your CV was very impressive. You've done a lot from an educational standpoint. You're established as a practitioner. Why would you go in and learn more? You've already, quote unquote, ticked all of the boxes. What did this bring to you that was unique to you and your role now?
Well, I still think there's more to learn. I think you have to continue learning throughout your career. And you talked about sort of systems improvement. Well, actually, it's about personal improvement as well. And we live and work in a continually changing environment. And if you just stand still, you're going to get left behind. So I think from a personal development point of view, it was important to enable me to carry on doing my job and progressing in my role. But also it was just really interesting. It was just something that was great to do to have, and it gave me enthusiasm for my work. It made me look at my work in a different way and sort of see ways I could improve it or do things differently. And I think I'm really glad that I did the full program. It's been excellent.
Very nice. Now one of the questions I get asked quite often is, or one of the concerns that that potential students have, has to do with time. And each of us are rather stretched usually in our professional roles, which leaves very little time for our personal life. What would you say to somebody to say, do you really have time to do this and the energy to do this? What would your response be?
Well, I think, as you said in the presentation, there are not a lot of face-to-face study days. You're not watching loads of lectures. You're not being forced to do lots of assignments. So it is manageable in terms of, I think 4 or 5 study days during the year. I could get the time off work to attend those. The assignments in the first 2 years are 3,000 words, which is not a lot of work. You have to be organised. You have to have a sort of a plan for it, but it's not going to take you days to write a 3,000 word essay. There's loads of support from the team at DMU to help when you were struggling, when I was struggling with anything or any of the work that was needed. So that helped. And then when it came to the masters year, that was harder. I was really basically going into the masters year when the pandemic hit. I was already overstretched before then, and actually the university allowed me to defer my submission date by 6 months, and that enabled me to catch up and get on top of it and submit my work, and I'm glad that I did.
So thank you very much, Andy, for mentioning that there is a flexibility to the timelines. Now, we do have the postgraduate certificate is a year-long program. Now, we do have opportunities to have extensions, to have interruptions and deferrals if we need. What would be the one thing that you would recommend to somebody who is rather hesitant? They find themselves maybe burning out, or they're on the edge of burning out, but they're really not sure that they can take on one more thing. What would you say to them about the return on their investment, from a personal standpoint, maybe from a professional standpoint, that might help put them a little bit at ease that they could indeed do this?
Sure. Well, I think the service improvement activities, this is increasingly becoming part of sort of an expectation if you're working in the health service that you would take part in these. And certainly in my GP role, I'm a salaried GP. Basically, the organisation saying to me, we want our salaried GPs doing audits, service improvement activities. So actually, why not do that as part of something that actually also develops you? So, and that's what I liked about the second year of the course. It was a very pragmatic. What service improvement would you like to do? Do it, review it, discuss it with your peers, discuss it with Gary and the rest of the team, and make it into something really meaningful and that benefited me, but also benefited the organisations that I work for. And it was done as part of my job. I did it in working hours. I was being paid for doing it in many ways. And I think the fact that also it's not directive. This course says we want you to do a service improvement activity. It's not you must do this particular one. It's do what you like. And my projects were around education, so they were to do with work I was doing at the medical school. But I've seen my colleagues were doing work in healthcare. They were doing things that were quite a wide range of activities. So I think build it into your working life, make it part of your working life, and then it works.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Andy. So we're at our half an hour that we allotted ourselves, and so I thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insight and your involvement in the program and your continued involvement. So I'll just simply end this this particular information session saying, if you do have additional questions that you would like, visit the website. Hopefully that will address some of your questions. But please do not hesitate at all to reach out to me. So we do have one quick question. And so it says, hi, is it possible to study to remain in the UK for work? So I'm not too sure about the question. Again, the inclusion criteria to get into our program is you're gainfully employed. So you're employed within the healthcare system within England right now and have been so for 2 years. And so is it possible to study to remain in the UK? I'm not too sure. I can possibly answer that question maybe offline a little bit better. So if you want to send me a message about that, I can certainly try to address that for you, because I think it sounds like it's a pretty important question. So if there are no other questions, I really appreciate this. Again, you can reach out to me. You can reach out or go head to the website, and we'll hopefully help fill in any of the gaps that you may have. Again, Andy, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone who tapped in today or who is watching later on. The world needs good leadership. Good leaders absolutely transform the world for the better. And we know bad leadership, unfortunately, kills. We can do something about it is the biggest message. We provide, hopefully, the skill sets that you will be able to develop that will prevent your own burnout, but more importantly, will help you serve the others that you desperately want to serve so much better. And so with that, I'm Dr. Gary Kyle, or Dr. Gary Redfeather, I'm sorry, and I appreciate your time, and we will hopefully be in contact with you soon. Thank you very much.